your enthusiasm, but we want to get this program going. First of all, my name is Gary Ayrassian. I'm the city's Director of Planning and Development, and I welcome all of you on this hot July day to come here, so you all deserve a round of applause. So thank you very much for coming. Very, very important session. I don't want to keep us here any longer than we have to be. We have Mayor Desimone here is going to say a few words, and then we're going to hand it over to our consultant, Judi Barrett, the Barrett Planning Group.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Gary. First of all, thank you all for coming out. In today's world of social media, and there's a lot of posting, both productive and otherwise, it's good to see people, because people still matter. Being in person still matters, and getting together matters. So I want to thank Gary Ayrassian, 37-year employee, one of the hardest working employees in the city, runs a fantastic department. Thank you to the planning department staff. Thank you to the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee members. Yay, Gary. How many of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee members are here? Thank you, folks. These folks have been working hard for over a year now, right, Gary?
Close to 2 years now, yeah.
Oh, yep, close to 2 years they've been grinding. Thank you, folks. Thank you to Judi Barrett and her associates and colleagues, and thank you again all for coming. Most of you may know this, but a comprehensive plan it's not just a plan, right? It's a promise, it's a potential, it can be political, it's policy, and fundamentally it's people. We're showing the community now and the community in the future that we care about the future of our community and what is in the best interest of the city and its residents. And it's people like you that formulate this plan. That's what makes it matter. Gary could write one of these himself if he wanted to, but it would not be the same living, viable, textual, contextual document that it will be with the input of so many different kinds of people here from different groups. I see John DeVerb and Bill Ward, so we've got developers here, we've got people from the planning board here, we've got business owners here, and residents and city staff. We need all of you and all of your contributions to make it as rich and awesome as it can be. So thank you again for coming. I leave you in the good hands of one Judi Barrett.
Thank you, Randy. So, I have to tell you, my husband's away this week, and I spoke with him about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and I said, I'm going to Attleboro tonight. And I bet not many people will be there, because it's a beautiful night, and people have things to do. And I walk in this building, and I see you people. I have to tell you, I've been working with this city off and on for 25 years. Gary and I go way back. And every time I've worked on a project here, I've seen this kind of enthusiasm for Attleboro, and it is just so heartwarming. You just can't imagine what it's like to work in some other communities where you just never see this kind of turnout. So I appreciate all of you being here. We're going to kick this off with a little presentation for all of you, just so you kind of know where the project is and what we've been doing all this time and what the committee's been doing. And then Krista Moravec from Horsley Witten Group and I are going to tag team on a bit of a presentation about this sort of setting up what we're going to be asking you to do tonight. When we get to the point that we're going to stop talking, then you're going to hear from my other colleagues who are here, Will, Tony, Fiona, and Lily, who's I think still out maybe staffing the table out there, who are going to help guide you through a discussion at the tables that you're at. We had planned on having you get up and move around to different tables every 20 minutes. I think what we might do, instead of asking you to move, because there's a lot of people in this room, is we may just move the easels and the flip charts, and we'll just move them around so you can kind of stay put. I just think that's probably the best way to do it. Anyway, and after that, we will ask you to sort of do a report back. I think I'll rely on my consulting colleagues here to do that report back, maybe just some high points that come out of each discussion at the tables. So we've already done these introductions. You know, many of the committee members are here. I told you who's in the room. We also have two other people working in Attleboro on different projects right now from my office. One is Brenna Trollander, who is not here this evening, but she has been working on a corridor study for the Route 1A area. Alexis Lanzalato worked on a housing needs assessment last year, and will be working with me about to kick off a project to form an affordable housing trust, and also to work on some housing-related zoning for the city. And then Olivia James also has done some work on this, well, not on this project, but the Route 1A corridor study. But she's on maternity leave with a really adorable baby, so she is not here this evening. Anyway, that's us. So we're here to talk about key issues tonight as a framework for getting some input from you folks about things that you think the city could do or should do over the next 10 to 15 years to address the statements that are up on these boards, which we're going to walk through with you, which are really the goal statements for the master plan. So these are kind of goal statements. And what we want to get some input from you about tonight is, what are things that you think the city could do to address some of those goals? We're not asking you to do our work for us, but I just know, because I've been in this business for 36 years now, that no matter what we think as consultants, you folks know your city better than we ever will, despite how long I've been working here. So we want to hear your ideas about what you think the city could do to address certain conditions around the topics that are addressed in the master plan. And those issues are really kind of critical, I would call the most tipping point type issues for the city. And we're looking at them in kind of three sort of system ways. One is natural systems, one is built systems, and one is community systems, which we'll explain more in a minute. And the systems kind of all come together around a couple of key questions. One of which is Attleboro a resilient community from your point of view? We'll talk about what resilience means when we start talking as groups. And do you have the capacity and the resources as a city to compete? Because every community is sort of competing for people, for things, for economic investment and so forth. So we'll get a little bit into what some of these things are that we're going to be talking about. And I think I'm going to turn it over to you. We're going to look at natural systems first.
Hello, everyone. Krista Moravec from Horsley, Witten. So some of the key issues related to natural systems, we've got three groupings. So the first is climate change and flooding, and just recognizing that there are a lot of major water bodies in Attleboro, lakes, major rivers, that all are making flooding already an issue today. And to think about climate, it's supposed to have more intense storms, more frequent storms, but the reality is Attleboro is already experiencing that. But the city's natural areas, such as your wetlands, your trees, your forested areas, so those are an opportunity to help store that water and help reduce the impacts to nearby properties. And another potential that's happening here is building on those natural areas, enhancing them in what's called nature-based or green infrastructure. And so those can help improve the resources that you have, the wetlands that you have, but also add to them. And those projects are already happening now in the city. So then thinking about the capacity to protect your land and your water resources. So with those many water sources, there's also several that are impaired. And they're for a variety of reasons. A few are listed here. Wastewater treatment plants that are upstream, stormwater runoff from lawns with fertilizers, invasive species, so a host of potential sources. You have public forests and trees. Those provide multiple benefits. They cool your air. They provide wildlife habitat. So those are important resources that you want to help maintain and protect. Your drinking water supply, it's a complex system. It's across 2 watersheds through multiple communities. There's a lot of challenges with that during drought, during excessive rain. There's a lot of infrastructure upgrades that happen, mandates from the feds as well as the state. So there's challenges associated with that. And all in all for this, really thinking about the capacity of and resources for staff, staffing, equipment, budget, really to maintain and manage all of these, to keep these systems healthy. And finally, open spaces and recreation. So one of the key things is the town has already been working on its open space and recreation plan. This is really important because it keeps the city eligible for funding to sort of protect the benefits of these resources. But really, when you think about the key issues related to them, the Conservation Commission, who owns and has the jurisdiction over conservation areas, they rely on volunteers to maintain those properties. So as you look for the city to continue to acquire and protect those areas, thinking about the capacity of the city to maintain those resources as well. But the city has partners, the Attleboro Land Trust, Mass Autobahn, Hgih Attleboro, all of these entities help support the city as it looks towards protecting those important natural areas. For the recreation piece of this slide, so the recreation department, they continue to work on evaluating opportunities for residents to be active, upgrading facilities to be accessible for people with disabilities. And then the city's parks department, so they're responsible for the more passive, the more landscaped parks. So really making future investments in those facilities, such as Capron Park and the Balfour Riverwalk Park, and thinking about Highland Park and ensuring that those resources are maintained and managed for future uses as well. And with that, I will turn it back to Judi.
So land use on one hand is sort of in its simple ways about zoning. But really, if you think about it, every time you get out of your car, whether you're in downtown or in a residential neighborhood or the schools, you're looking at land use. And one of the things we try to understand as consultants working on a master plan like this is trying to figure out, well, to what extent does the zoning you have relate to what's on the ground? And are there ways in which your zoning ordinance may inadvertently create conflicts that were not foreseen when the ordinance was adopted some time ago? So we look very carefully at both what your zoning says and what it doesn't say and what the patterns of land use are in your community. So that's what a land use component of a master plan does. Your ordinance, it's kind of an older, I would call it tired ordinance. I mean, there are provisions in there that may go back to before Barry was here. I'm not sure, but it needs some updating. It needs to be, I think, kind of revision in terms of what it cares about. So some zoning ordinances focus very much on quantity of how much can happen on land. Other zoning ordinances, more contemporary ones, are also very focused on quality. So we're kind of looking at both when we do a zoning ordinance review for our comprehensive plan. What we're finding from the other housing work that we've been doing, and also the community engagement for this process, is that there seems to be a growing demand in your community for a wider range of housing options. And amenities and sort of the mixed-use development that kind of creates a nice place to live and to be. And the question is, to what extent does the city zoning do that? It may do it better in downtown than perhaps in other parts of the city. Important areas that we think probably need to be focused on in terms of the land use component of the plan are this concept of gentle density, which is allowing a little more development in neighborhoods instead of being unduly restrictive in ways that may make it hard for the city to address housing interests that are forthcoming. Also looking at parking reform. Your city requires so much parking. And I know everybody's probably gonna scream and say, but I can't find a place to park in downtown Attleboro. Don't talk to me. I'm just telling you, your ordinance requires a lot of parking. And then, just sort of be thinking about how important is density as opposed to the sort of quality and feel of what gets built. What is the relationship between the new buildings in your town and the streets that surround them? And do you have a sense as a pedestrian of being in a neighborhood space? So these are things that we think about with land use. We also think about the relationship between land use and public health and safety. So you have areas in your community, you all know this, where there are contaminated sites and older or not particularly well-maintained properties. And some evidence of what I would call disinvestment. People kind of not really being as invested in the property as perhaps they were at one time, or perhaps the way previous owners were. And when you think about, so how do we perhaps use our land use policies to encourage reinvestment in these areas? You need to think about the possibility that some folks are probably going to be displaced. And how do you manage the sort of social and fairness benefits of that while you're also trying to encourage new development that will bring tax revenue and more vibrant parts of the city to life? Can more quality-focused land use policies strengthen your economic base and also reduce traffic congestion, noise, and so forth that comes along with living in a residential neighborhood next to a commercial area? City government's kind of another aspect of this sort of built system. And by that I mean, we're really looking at what kind of facilities do you have to provide the services that your community delivers to residents and businesses. So one of the things that we are passionate about is how do we help Attleboro become more, I guess what I call a smart city. Technology here, maybe in this building is great. City Hall, not so much. Technology can improve the speed and accuracy of how services get delivered, support more interdepartmental sharing, and increase access by residents and businesses and improve transparency. Attleboro is a little bit behind the times in terms of the kind of technology that's available when you walk into City Hall. So these are things that I think you're going to want to think about. Meeting ADA requirements, meaning making sure facilities are fully accessible to folks with disabilities. it's the law, but in some communities today, we're kind of going beyond thinking about what the law says, and actually how do you design neighborhoods that are universally accessible, universal design. So it's not just can you get in the building or can you find a disability parking space, but what is the environment around that and how does it connect to nearby neighborhoods and businesses and so forth. And does the city have the staff resources, organizational framework and so forth to meet its needs going forward? What would smart city policies look like in Attleboro? And I think this whole question of capacity has become near and dear to me as a consultant because I've seen so many communities struggle with this, especially since a law that some of you may be familiar with, because some of you are as old as I am, Proposition 2.5. And in Massachusetts, that's when we started to see a lot of things change in terms of investment in local government, and it has continued to evolve over time. Finally, we have community systems, and that includes things like housing. So during the community engagement process for this and also the housing needs assessment, we heard concerns about limited affordability for young people to either rent or buy a house in Attleboro and actually be able to put down roots here. We did what I call a 6-word story project for a while. We asked for residents to write their thoughts about Attleboro in 6 words. And that activity was available in a couple of parts of the city. And one of the things that came through when that's the 6-word story list was make Attleboro's housing affordable again. Housing reform usually takes 4 types of strategies. They're regulatory, which gets to the land use issue. There's capacity. Do you actually have the sort of people in your community to do advocacy and education, which is part of why we're talking about creating an affordable housing trust here. You have a great housing authority. You need some other arms to actually make the housing conversation move forward at a policy level here. The mayor being very interested in housing helps a lot. We're going to try to sort of move that conversation along. There's also the question of planning. How do you plan for the kinds of housing that you see? I always laugh when people ask me today, well, how many housing units do we need? I guarantee you, if someone had asked planning consultants in 1960, how many housing units they thought you were going to need, they would have been thinking in terms of numbers of households that had 5, 6, 7 people in them. No one was thinking in 1960 about the households that were going to shrink, and yet at the same time be forming household demand. And I'll give you an example. I have 9 children. And when we were all together in one house, there were 11 of us. But as they've moved out, they all created a demand for housing because they formed their own households. So what used to be 1 housing unit with 11 people is now 10 housing units. That's the story of what has happened in the last half of the previous century and into the 2000s. Is here we are now with these household formation rates that have very little to do with the population living in an individual unit. So there's a different conversation that needs to happen today about how you plan for housing. It's not so much your population change, it's your household change. And then really, to us, I think it's unclear at this point. We want you to help us understand how far the city's willing to go to encourage more housing and a wider variety of housing. Community Development Block Grant Program is one of several federal programs that may be on the chopping block under the current administration. Something for the city to think about is those programs have been very helpful to your lower and moderate income residents here and your businesses as well. What can you do to kind of help people as those funds begin to shrink to replace some of what they did? You have and also a remarkably small percentage of units right now on what we call the subsidized housing inventory. Most people in Attleboro haven't even heard of Chapter 40B because it doesn't come here, but it's probably going to come here. And all of a sudden, something that didn't matter to anybody is going to matter a lot. What does it take for us to get to 10%? And how can the city, or should the city even, promote more diversity in the composition of its boards and commissions? So there's a variety of things around community development that are worth talking about. And then on the local economy side, people here seem very enthusiastic and excited about transit-oriented development. The question we have is how can you support a strong downtown customer base and simultaneously manage parking demand? What does the future hold for your industrially zoned land? We often don't talk about that enough, I think, but how do you maximize the value of the industrial land that you have and keep companies here that have staying power? Are you becoming less of a local economic hub and more of a bedroom community? 85% of your residents work outside of Attleboro, and that percentage of people leaving Attleboro every day has gone up, while the jobs that you have are being filled more and more by people who are driving into Attleboro. So there's traffic implications to this, there's economic development implications, a lot of issues to think about. Do you have better opportunities to align your housing and economic development policies? You know, it's a little bit hard to fill jobs with local people if they can't find the housing that they need to be able to live in the community. And you have wonderful educational infrastructure here, what I would call. You've got the high school, this place is amazing. We have been always impressed with this school and all the cool things that are going on here. You have High Community College, you have Bridgewater State has a presence here, you know, and Witten's not far away. Do your educational partnerships for economic development, are they strong enough to meet your current and future workforce demands? So these are big questions that we have. And I'm going to stop talking in just a minute because my voice is going to go. I'd rather hear you guys talk anyway. We're going to ask you at the tables that you're at to respond to the questions that you see on these boards. So there are actually 4 different topic tables and a total of 8 topics. So we have put 2 topics on each one of these boards that are related to each other. And our facilitators are going to try to get out of you what you think the city could do to address some of these, I'll call them comprehensive plan goals. What do you think the city could do? We're going to start the report out, and I'm going to ask Krista to tell you kind of what the top 3 to 5 things were that came up at the various tables that she has talked to.
Thank you. So I kind of went through and I tried to highlight things that came up at almost every single group that we talked with. So the first one was trees, in different ways. So managing trees, healthy trees, street trees, how trees are impacted from development, so the importance of them, so ensuring healthy trees and making sure that they're managed properly. Wetlands also came up. So there was several tables that talked about the 20-foot no disturbance and thinking, discussion about it was proposed to increase it. There were some pros and cons of that. So still an important issue that we'll have to tackle in this plan. Accessibility also came up. So accessibility at our parks and our playgrounds, accessibility at open spaces and conservation areas. So thinking about how we can make them more welcoming for all residents. And the last one I'll point out, drinking water. Drinking water, the infrastructure, capacity, quality, so all of that. Another really big, important issue as part of the comp plan. So thank you for all of that.
Thank you, Krista.
At my tables, we talked about transportation and economic development. So for transportation, we had a lot of discussion, but some things that kept kind of coming up over and over again were the needs for better bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure throughout the city and also in downtown. There was a lot of talk about expanded GATRA service, both more stops, but also more frequency and running later, and the ways to connect that into town. There was also a lot of discussion about improving safety and enforcement for some of the existing rules, things like getting people from not parking on the sidewalks, snow clearing of the existing sidewalks, improved tree clearance, protecting some of those dangerous crosswalks in the city. The senior center came up several times in that discussion. And there was also, came up several times, I think at almost every table we were at, the idea of satellite parking with some sort of shuttle to connect people into downtown without needing to go and park there directly. Tying into economic development, again, the parking came up several times, but also in addition to that, there was a lot of discussion about ways the city can support people that are looking to start businesses and run businesses, whether that is through information or kind of helping handhold some people that are just starting businesses and getting them access to resources, sharing what's out there, as well as making sure that in the new development that's happening in downtown, there is commercial space in there, and that kind of essentially trying to tie the needs of the new housing that's coming to downtown into commercial activity in those areas as well. And especially the need to create some smaller focus for entrepreneurs, those smaller spaces, the live work studios, things like that. And I think those were the big things that we heard from the economic development group. I apologize if I missed any of your details, but just trying to hit the highlights on that.
It's totally fine.
Well, I listened to conversations that covered 4 topics, so I'm going to try and hit all of them, but be very brief. Just going off of what Will said, for transportation, it's about creating sidewalks, bike lanes, and maintaining and addressing kind of the bottlenecks in high traffic areas that feel unsafe for people in cars, on bikes, or just walking around. For economic development, there was conversation about the mental capital of a lot of the folks who have retired in Attleboro and how we can kind of link that to these young entrepreneurs who are looking to develop and grow their businesses. And also conversations about incubators, maintaining and supporting small businesses in the area. For housing, conversations included allowing for affordable housing to be high quality and dispersed across neighborhoods and even across buildings in the same neighborhood. And then finally, for zoning, we spoke about what kind of housing, dense housing would be appropriate in single family areas. And in that, we spoke about clustered kind of cottage style homes that really recognize the beauty of open space while still accommodating for more dense units. With that, I'll pass it to Tony.
Yep, thank you.
Hi. So I cover community facilities and cultural and historic resources. And a lot of the themes touched on those ideas shared already by Fiona and Will. So multi-generational housing and more community support for multi-generational, intergenerational housing for seniors, making neighborhoods more connected either through more bus routes and making it easier to open a neighborhood corner store, convenience store, right? And then the other theme for culture and historical resources, preserving or trying to enhance services already provided by the library that supports a lot of these people who live in the community, and just supporting and providing more events and activities to highlight the city's historical features. Examples include info plaques at historical sites or features like in Boston, for instance, they have the Freedom Walk, plaques on the sidewalks, things like scavenger hunt with an architectural theme for students to engage in, and overall increasing accessibility of historical structures and buildings to make it easier for people with disabilities to access and enjoy.
All right, in my group, so we talked about land use and housing, and we sort of talked about them all at once, so I'll just run through a few quick things. Most groups talked about incentivizing more affordable and low-income housing, and the need for more diverse housing types, such as the missing middle housing and options, particularly for early professionals and older adults. We talked about more walkable, transit-oriented mixed-use neighborhoods, so people could walk to stores and have open space where they live. And finally, most groups talked about managing or balancing growth with other concerns like services, stormwater, water infrastructure, school capacity, things like that. So what do we want Attleboro to look like, and how do we get there?
First of all, we're getting close to 2 hours. Thank you very, very much for coming out tonight. It's a warm, beautiful summer day in July, so I know it took a lot for you to come here, so it means a lot to me, the steering committee, the consultant. We heard you loud and clear. I love the ideas, the thoughts, your aspirations. I will tell you, they resonate with us. We're going to wrap up this project probably by the end of this calendar year. And your thoughts and ideas, like I said, will be rolled in to our goals and policies. Keep an eye out. We'll have a draft out at some point for review. So I will also tell you, my email address is on the city's website. Tonight's not the end of it. I encourage all of you, if you can, if you have still some ideas. We can't just turn it on at 6:30 and turn it off at 8:20. I'm sure the ideas are flowing, so I encourage all of you, if you can, or if you're willing, please email me your thoughts and ideas. Again, this is fluid. So again, thank you all very, very much for your ideas and thoughts of the conversation. And stay tuned for a document that's really going to guide the city for the next 10, 15 years. And we're in excellent hands with the Barrett Group. So thank you all very, very much.